So, recapping our last class, we talked about temporal judgment and eschatological judgment. The idea that God rewards in time or punishes in time, or the idea that God rewards at the end of time. And the book of Daniel has several stories of Daniel and his friends being thrown in the lion's den, being thrown in the furnace. And those seem to be typical stories where they are faithful to God, and so God protects them from death. They're good Jewish boys, and they don't pray to a pagan god, so God saves them from the flames. And that really doesn't work. The people who were faithful Jews who died in the Holocaust were not saved from the flames. People who are good suffer in our world. So the book of Daniel actually contains a section which includes a different outlook. By the way, the last two chapters of Daniel are only in the Catholic Bible. Daniel chapter 2, 4, 5, 7, and then 8 through 12 are different stories. They are eschatological stories. They are stories that say that God's final justice will come at the end of time, that evil will be punished at the end of time, and the good will be rewarded at the end of time. They are actually a very specific type of literature called apocalyptic literature. And apocalyptic literature has certain features, and I want you to jot these down in your notebook, and I want you to take a picture of your notes at the end of this part and submit those on Canvas. Apocalyptic literature is written during times of persecution. The book of Daniel is written when the Jews are being oppressed by the Greeks and forced to adopt Greek religion and culture and to abandon their Jewish faith. The book of Revelation is written at a time that Christians are being persecuted. Apocalyptic literature is written with a lot of symbolism. There's lots of dreams and visions and a lot of symbolic language. The book of Revelation, when the Christians are being persecuted, contains the number 666, and there's a seven-headed beast. And the book of Daniel contains a lot of visions and dreams with symbolic value about the different empires, most notably the Greek Empire, which is responsible for oppressing the Jewish people through their process of Hellenization, and how God is going to triumph over the Greeks, just as God triumphed over the Assyrians and the Babylonians and everybody else. Apocalyptic literature is meant to reveal in general, and I emphasize in general, what will happen at the end of time. And what's going to happen at the end of time is God wins, and those who are on God's side win and are saved. And in general, those who have opposed God or persecuted God's people will be held to account. There are people, Christians, who read the book of Revelation as though it's a literal description of what's going to happen at the end of the world. Or they read the book of Daniel or portions of Ezekiel as though it's referring to specific events. Oh, 666, that was the flight number for such and such. Or the seven-headed beast, that symbolizes the city of San Francisco, not the city of Rome. But from the Catholic perspective, apocalyptic literature is revealing that in the end, God is going to make everything right, and it's not meant to be taken as a literal description of the end of time. So I'd like you to take a picture of those notes and submit them. I'm going to say a couple more things about Daniel and then shift to the quiz material. The book of Daniel takes place. Daniel and his friends are supposed to be Jews who are in exile in Babylonia. That's the setting of the story, and probably not a literal history. It's a historical fiction. Other books of the Bible have specific historical settings. The book of Ruth that we'll read before the next test, and the book of Jonah. Ruth is set back in the time of the judges. Jonah is set in the time of the Assyrian Empire. The book of Tobit, which was extra credit, was set in the exile of the northern tribes. Esther, which was extra credit, is set in the Persian period. And so there's a very specific setting for each of these stories, except for the book of Judith, which doesn't really seem to have any historical value whatsoever. That is extra credit as well. But it's important to also realize when books were written. So the book of Daniel takes place in the Babylonian period, but the book of Daniel was written much later when the Greeks had taken over the Jews, and it was meant to address their needs. The Greeks aren't letting us worship our God. The Greeks are forcing us to eat their food. The Greeks are persecuting us, and the book of Daniel was meant to reassure them that God was going to take care of everything. In addition, the book of Jonah was composed much later and has a much more highly developed theological theme than people had back in the time that the story takes place. And the book of Ruth takes place back in the time of the Judges, but it's kind of addressing some issues that are going on in the post-exilic community. So I'm not going to test you on that, but just giving you a perspective on where some of these stories fit. So this next part